Today, we are talking about something many of us might recognize in our own lives or in the lives of people we know. It is about how adults keep a certain distance from their families, especially from parents and siblings. We're looking at why this happens for people who have a particular way of connecting with others, which is often called a dismissive avoidant style. Our conversation is based on a really helpful book, Understanding the Dismissive Avoidant Attachment Style by Mindy Ravers. Chloe, let's start with parents. What does this adult distance from parents look like, and why is it so common?
Well, Sophie, it often does not look like big fights or obvious problems. Instead, it can seem like politeness. Phone calls stay short, visits feel like they are just part of a routine, and conversations never really go deep. Imagine a grown child who has moved far away in their feelings, even if they still come home for holidays. For dismissive avoidant people, this distance from parents feels normal, like it is just how things should be. It can even feel like a peaceful way to live. That's interesting. So it is not always a dramatic break, but more of a quiet, emotional separation. Why does this kind of distance happen? Is it because they just don't care as much?
It is usually not about not caring. Many dismissive avoidants grew up in homes where showing feelings or getting very close emotionally was difficult. Maybe their parents took care of their needs for food and shelter, but struggled with understanding their feelings. So the child learned to rely only on themselves. They learned not to share their inner world with their parents. This became a habit. As adults, this habit stays. They might not call often, they might not talk about their personal problems, they keep chats focused on safe topics. This distance feels natural to them because it matches the emotional distance they felt growing up.
So it is almost like a learned behavior from childhood, carried into adulthood. But can this distance also be a way to protect themselves? Yes, it can be a form of protection. If someone grew up with a lot of criticism or high expectations, being too close as an adult can bring back old feelings of shame. A phone call might feel like they are being checked up on. A visit can make them feel judged again, like when they were little. The adult does not want to feel like a child anymore. So distance becomes a way to keep their self-respect. They might say they are just independent, and that can be true, but independence can also be a shield to keep old emotional pain from coming back. That makes sense. It's like they're trying to avoid feeling bad again. What happens when parents, as they get older, want to be closer? Do they understand this need for distance? That can be very tricky. Some parents become more open with their feelings as they age. They might want to have deeper talks with their grown children about feelings or family history. For a dismissive avoidant adult, this can feel very confusing. They spent years building up this distance to feel safe. Now, their parent is trying to get close in a way the adult child is not ready for. The adult child might then pull away even more. The parent feels hurt, and the adult child feels overwhelmed. This often makes the distance even bigger. And sometimes parents might try to get that closeness using guilt, right? Like saying they are missed, implying the child is ungrateful. Exactly. When a parent tries to connect through guilt, it can make the dismissive avoidant adult feel trapped. Guilt feels like a way of being controlled, and that makes them pull away. They might feel relief, but also some bitterness. The relationship can get stuck in a pattern where the parent keeps trying to get closer and the adult child keeps pulling back. It is like what happens in some romantic relationships, but with a lot more history behind it. It sounds very draining for everyone involved. You mentioned emotional exhaustion earlier. How does that play into this adult distance from parents?
Many dismissive avoidants grew up being the strong one, the child who did not cause trouble. They might have been expected to always be competent. As adults, they can get tired of always playing this role within the family. They might feel that being around their parents means they have to be a certain person, the polite one, the successful one, the one who never creates problems. This acting can be very tiring. So distance becomes a way to avoid the hard work of going back into a role that doesn't fit them anymore.
So it is less about not loving their family and more about protecting their own emotional energy from old demands. But can this distance ever be a healthy thing?
Absolutely. It is very important to remember that sometimes distance is a healthy boundary. Some parents are still critical or emotionally harmful, not just in the past, but right now. In these cases, distance is not just an avoidant way of coping, it is self-protection. The goal is not to force closeness with parents at any cost. It is about understanding your own patterns and making choices that truly support your well-being. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to have limited contact. Sometimes it is to have more honest contact. And sometimes it is a mix of both. That's a powerful point. It is not about blame, but about understanding what is best for yourself. If someone wants to heal this distance, where do they even begin? Healing often starts with figuring out what feels unsafe. For some dismissive avoidants, emotional talks with a parent feel risky because they bring up old shame. For others, closeness feels risky because it could lead to guilt or feeling like they have to do things. For still others, there is a deep sadness about what was missing in childhood, and that sadness feels too painful to touch. Understanding these deeper feelings helps you decide what you truly want. Maybe you want more connection, or clearer boundaries, or to simply accept that the relationship will stay limited. All of these choices are valid.
It sounds like a journey of self-discovery first. Let's move on to siblings. Sibling relationships also have a long history. How do these dismissive avoidant patterns show up between brothers and sisters? Sibling relationships carry the longest history of all, filled with childhood roles, family rules, and old hurts. For dismissive avoidance, siblings can be both familiar and difficult. A sibling might know you better than anyone, but they can also pull you back into an old version of yourself you worked hard to change. Strain between siblings usually comes from distance and politeness and the feeling that you do not truly know each other as adults. So it is not always fighting, but a lack of deep connection. How do these roles start in childhood and affect adult sibling relationships? In many families, children take on different roles. One might be responsible, another emotional, another the peacekeeper. A dismissive avoidant child often becomes the capable one, the one who doesn't need much, always composed. A sibling who shows more emotion might feel closer to parents. Over time, the dismissive avoidant sibling might feel misunderstood. The emotional sibling might feel ignored. These differences set the stage for tension later in life. Can you give an example of how this plays out in adulthood?
Certainly. One sibling might call to talk about a family problem and wants emotional support. The dismissive avoidant sibling responds with practical advice or a short answer, then quickly ends the call. The emotional sibling feels dismissed and hurt. The dismissive avoidant sibling feels overwhelmed but also relieved. This makes the relationship tense. The emotional sibling might stop reaching out or try even harder. The avoidant sibling pulls away more. It is a cycle of one pursuing and the other withdrawing, but with old family wounds making it even more charged. It sounds like both people are feeling hurt, but they're showing it in different ways. What about unresolved childhood hurts between siblings? A dismissive avoidant person might have felt unseen as a child. They might have seen a sibling get more emotional attention. They might have felt their own needs were overlooked because they were so good at seeming okay. As adults, they might carry a quiet resentment, but also guilt for that resentment, which makes it hard to talk openly. Instead of real conversation, they keep distance. The sibling relationship stays shallow because being truly honest feels too risky. And the other sibling might feel resentment too, for the avoidant sibling being distant. Yes, the other sibling might feel the avoidant one never shows up emotionally or acts superior. They might remember needing comfort and not getting it. They could see the avoidant sibling's lack of emotion as a lack of love. The avoidant sibling might not understand this because they were helping in the only way they knew how. Both siblings feel wronged, and the relationship becomes strained because neither truly feels seen by the other. It seems like differences in how they deal with parents can also create strain between siblings. Absolutely. Some siblings stay very close to parents and take on caregiving roles, while others keep their distance. A dismissive avoidant sibling often values distance because it protects them from criticism or guilt. A sibling who stays close to parents might see this distance as selfishness. They might feel abandoned with all the responsibility and criticize the avoidant sibling. This makes the avoidant sibling pull away even more, feeling judged. The relationship becomes strained not because anyone is bad, but because the family system puts uneven emotional burdens on everyone. So it is less about personal fault and more about how the family system works. What happens during a family crisis, like a parent becoming ill, when these differences are magnified? If a parent becomes ill, one sibling might become the main caregiver and feel very overwhelmed. They call the dismissive avoidant sibling and express frustration. The avoidant sibling feels attacked and might get defensive or withdraw. The caregiver sibling feels even more alone. The avoidant sibling feels pressured and guilty. The problem becomes more about blame than solving the actual situation. The strain gets deeper. Both siblings are likely scared and grieving, but their old ways of coping stop them from connecting. That is heartbreaking. So how can adult siblings start to heal these strained relationships? Healing begins by understanding that siblings often have different versions of the same family story. Each sibling experienced childhood differently and coped in their own way. When you can accept this, you can reduce blame. You can start to see that your siblings' reactions make sense, even if they hurt. This does not excuse bad behavior, but it helps you understand the emotions behind it. This understanding can open a door to empathy, which is what allows adult siblings to build a new relationship that is not stuck in childhood roles. And for dismissive avoidance, what does healing look like? Does it mean becoming very emotional? Not necessarily. For dismissive avoidance, healing often means learning to show warmth without feeling trapped. You might not want very deep emotional talks, but you can offer small signs of care. You can check in briefly. You can acknowledge a sibling's stress. You can say you appreciate them. These small gestures can reduce years of distance. They also give you a chance to practice being emotionally present in a situation that is often less intense than a romantic relationship. Sibling relationships can be a place to learn to connect more without losing your boundaries.
That is a wonderful way to think about it. Practice for emotional connection. Let's shift our focus to family crises. These are times when emotions are high and people really need comfort. But dismissive avoidants often struggle to show care in these moments, even if they care deeply. Why is that?
Family crises can bring illness, death, or money troubles, and emotions become very intense. In these moments, people expect warmth and comfort. Dismissive avoidants may care deeply, but struggle to show it in a way others can feel. They might help in practical ways, but seem emotionally distant. They might avoid calls or keep conversations short. They can seem calm, which others might see as cold. This causes misunderstandings and hurt, especially when people need to feel supported most. So it is not a lack of feeling, but a struggle with expressing it. Why does this emotional intensity feel overwhelming to them? Many dismissive avoidants learned early on that emotions were not safe. Maybe their feelings were shamed, ignored, or met with criticism. In a crisis, the emotional volume gets too high for their usual ways of coping. Their system might respond by focusing only on tasks or by pulling away. Action feels safer because it's concrete. Withdrawal feels safer because it reduces exposure. Giving emotional comfort, which others want, can feel impossible to them. Can you give an example of what this looks like during a crisis? Imagine a parent gets sick and the family gathers. People are crying and talking about their feelings. The dismissive avoidant person feels tense. They might not know what to say, or they might fear making things worse. They might also worry about being pulled into taking care of everyone's emotions. So they focus on practical things, calling doctors, arranging rides, handling paperwork. The family appreciates the help, but still feels emotionally alone. Someone might say the avoidant person is cold. The avoidant person feels misunderstood because they are doing all they can. Inside, they are often trying to show care through actions because actions feel safe. It is a disconnect between how they show love and how others need to receive it. What about grief? Do they struggle with that too? Yes, many dismissive avoidants are good at pushing feelings down to keep functioning. In a crisis, this skill becomes even stronger. They might feel numb or strangely calm. They might keep busy and organized. Others might think this calm means they do not care, but actually, the calm might be a way of shutting down emotionally. They are protecting themselves from being flooded with feelings. They might not even feel their grief until later, after the crisis has passed and they are alone. This difference in timing can cause hurt because others expect shared grief in the moment.
So their strength is also a shield, and they might also fall back into old family roles in a crisis? Absolutely. The dismissive avoidant person might return to being the strong one, the responsible one, the one who does not break down. This role feels necessary, but it also stops them from emotional closeness. If you believe your job is to be strong, you might not let yourself cry or ask for comfort. You might not say you are scared. You focus on keeping the family stable. Others might admire your strength, but also feel that you are not there emotionally. The avoidant person might feel proud and lonely at the same time. It sounds like a very isolating experience for them, even when they are helping. How can dismissive avoidants learn to show care in these critical moments in a way that feels more connecting? Healing this pattern starts by understanding that emotional care can be simple. It does not mean you need perfect words. It often means just being there. You can sit with someone. You can hold a hand. You can say you are sorry for what is happening. You can say you love them. You can say you do not know what to say, but you are here. These simple sentences can feel awkward for dismissive avoidants because they show emotion, but they are often deeply comforting. They show that you are emotionally with the person, not just managing the situation. So small acts of presence can make a big difference. And what about taking breaks?
It helps to communicate boundaries clearly. Dismissive avoidants often fear being swallowed up by other people's emotions. In crises, emotions are intense, and it is normal to need breaks. A healthier way is to take breaks without disappearing. You can say, "I need an hour alone and I will be back," or "I need to step outside and get some air." Clear communication stops loved ones from thinking your need for space means you are rejecting them. It also helps you stay present more consistently because you don't feel trapped.
That is a very practical piece of advice. Let's move on to avoiding family obligations, things like holidays, birthdays, or helping out. For some, these feel natural. For dismissive avoidants, why can these feel so heavy or even suffocating?
Family obligations often carry a lot of emotional weight beyond just the activity. A holiday meal is not just food. It is a whole family system in one room. It brings back old roles, old ways of acting, and old expectations. For dismissive avoidants, going back into the family setting can bring back feelings of being judged, unseen, or controlled. Even in a loving family, they might feel a quiet tension before they even arrive. They might expect criticism, guilt, or emotional demands. The obligation then feels less like connecting and more like entering a space where they have to manage themselves very carefully. So it is the underlying emotions and expectations that make it difficult. How does this lead to avoiding those obligations? When a family member expects everyone to attend a gathering and expresses disappointment if someone cannot, the dismissive avoidant person feels pressured. They might not feel free to choose. They might feel that if they say no, they will be punished with guilt or criticism. Their body hears obligation as control. In response, they avoid. They might say they have work or are sick. They might wait until the last minute. The family feels hurt and angry. The avoidant person feels relief, but also guilt. Deep down, they are often protecting their freedom because freedom feels like safety. It sounds like a constant battle between their need for freedom and the family's desire for togetherness. And this avoidance can also be about emotional effort, what we sometimes call emotional labor. Yes, many dismissive avoidants have learned to cope by staying calm and contained. Family gatherings often involve emotional talks, complaints, or relatives wanting attention. Even in happy families, gatherings can be loud, crowded, and unpredictable. For an avoidant person, this can be too much. They might feel drained very quickly. They might not be used to openly taking breaks because breaks can seem like rejection. So they avoid the obligation completely because it feels easier than managing the discomfort.
So, avoiding is a way to manage being overwhelmed. But is it always a problem to avoid family obligations? It is very important to say that some family obligations are truly unfair. Some families rely too much on one child and make them feel guilty to get them to comply. Some families have boundaries that are always crossed. Some families demand emotional care without giving respect. In those cases, avoidance can be an understandable and healthy boundary. Not every family expectation is good for you. Dismissive avoidants sometimes get criticized for avoiding, but they are actually protecting themselves from a system that doesn't respect them. The goal is not to force you into obligations that hurt you. The goal is to understand why you avoid so you can make choices on purpose rather than just reacting automatically. That is an important distinction. It is about conscious choice. If someone wants to manage this, how can they approach family obligations without feeling completely drained or trapped?
Healing avoidance of family obligations starts with being clear about what you can offer. Dismissive avoidants often avoid because they fear being controlled once they engage. A healthier way is to engage with clear boundaries. You can decide what gatherings you will attend and for how long. You can decide what topics you will discuss. You can decide how often you will call. Then you communicate these limits calmly and consistently. Consistency is key because it reduces arguing and guilt. When you show up in a predictable way, your family can adjust their expectations over time, even if they do not like it at first. So, setting clear boundaries and sticking to them. Let's move on to emotional flatness in family gatherings. What does this look like, and why do dismissive avoidants often appear distant or quiet in places where others expect warmth? Emotional flatness can look like a neutral face, not talking much, showing little affection, and not having strong reactions, even during important moments. Family members might think this means they are cold or rude, or that they just do not care. The avoidant person might feel misunderstood because inside they may care deeply but feel very uncomfortable showing it. Emotional flatness is usually not on purpose. It is often a way to protect themselves, to stay steady in a place that brings up old patterns and feelings. So it is a coping mechanism. Why do family gatherings specifically trigger this reaction? Family gatherings are full of history. Even if no one says anything harsh, the body remembers. Old roles, old expectations, and old ways of being seen can come back the moment you walk in. A dismissive avoidant person might unconsciously prepare by turning down their emotions. Flatness becomes a way to manage themselves. If feelings rise, they might feel exposed. They might fear being criticized, teased, or pressured. By staying flat, they reduce risk. They stay in control. They keep the gathering manageable for themselves. It sounds like a way to control their inner world when the outer world feels too much. Is it also because they might not have learned how to show emotions? That is a big part of it. Many dismissive avoidants did not learn how to express emotions in their childhood home. If affection and warmth were limited, they might not have a natural habit of hugging, praising, or sharing feelings with relatives. They might feel awkward doing it or embarrassed. They might worry it will seem fake, so they stay reserved. Their family then sees them as distant. But the truth is, they are simply not practiced. Emotional expression feels unfamiliar, so flatness becomes the default because it feels less risky than trying to be warm and failing. So it is not a lack of caring, but a lack of skill and comfort. How can someone who experiences this emotional flatness start to connect in a way that feels more real without being overwhelming? Healing does not mean you have to become very expressive in family settings. It means understanding what flatness does for you and deciding if the cost is worth it. If flatness helps you survive a harmful environment, it might be a necessary boundary.
But if flatness is stopping you from connections you truly want, you can try small acts of warmth. Small acts are important because they do not overwhelm you. You might make eye contact and smile more on purpose. You might ask one genuine question. You might offer a brief, gentle touch. You might express one simple feeling, like saying you are glad to see someone. These steps can soften the flatness without exposing you too much. Small steps towards more connection. That makes sense. And taking breaks, like we discussed before? Yes, taking breaks openly helps a lot. Many avoidant people become flat because they are overwhelmed and do not know how to step away without seeming rude. If you can say you need a moment and go for a short walk, you can reduce feeling overwhelmed without shutting down. When your body is less flooded, you can be more present. This is a practical way to respect your own nervous system. It also means you need emotional flatness less as a defense.
That is very helpful. Let's talk about caregiving roles. As parents age or family members get sick, caregiving often comes up. Why do dismissive avoidant people often feel intense pressure or even resentment in these roles? Caregiving means supporting an aging parent, helping a sick relative, or handling logistics when someone is vulnerable. Many people see caregiving as just responsibility and love. But for dismissive avoidance, caregiving can bring up deep fears. It can awaken the fear of being trapped, the fear of endless obligation, and the fear of being emotionally overwhelmed. A dismissive avoidant person might care deeply but still struggle with the role, sometimes in ways that surprise even them. So it touches on their core fears. Caregiving demands a lot of presence and emotional tenderness. How does that clash with their usual ways of coping?
Caregiving asks for presence and consistency, and it often has no clear end. It needs emotional tenderness, patience, and a willingness to sit with someone else's pain. For dismissive avoidance, these demands can feel threatening because they touch the very places that feel unsafe to them. Many learned that emotions are private and depending on others is risky. Caregiving flips that completely. It is built on dependence. Someone relies on you. They need you. They might not be able to manage their own emotions and lean on you for help. For someone who sees being needed as losing freedom, this can trigger panic or resentment. That is a big challenge, and old family dynamics can make this even harder, can't they? Yes, they absolutely do. Caregiving can pull you right back into childhood roles. If you were the responsible one, you might feel you have to do everything. If you were the quiet one, you might feel you cannot ask for help. If you felt unseen, you might feel caregiving forces you to give to people who did not give emotionally to you. That last experience can be especially painful. A dismissive avoidant person might feel caregiving is unfair because it asks them to show tenderness to a parent who was not tender with them. They might not want to admit this, but the feeling can exist, and when it is not acknowledged, it often turns into resentment and pulling away. So they are caring for someone who perhaps did not care for them emotionally in the same way, and that is a huge internal conflict. How can they manage these caregiving roles without becoming completely overwhelmed? Healing the struggle of caregiving roles starts with recognizing your limits. Many dismissive avoidants either do too much or pull away completely. Doing too much means taking on everything because it feels safer than relying on others. Pulling away means avoiding the role entirely because it feels too consuming. The healthier middle ground is to share responsibility with clear boundaries. This means asking for help, giving tasks to others, and being honest about what you can and cannot do. This can be hard for dismissive avoidance because it means relying on others, and reliance feels dangerous. But caregiving often cannot be done alone without harm. Asking for help is not a weakness, it is facing reality. Asking for help can be incredibly hard, but crucial. Let's turn our attention to parenting. If a dismissive avoidant person becomes a parent, how does their attachment style influence their parenting, even if they want to do better than their own upbringing? Many dismissive avoidant adults become loving, responsible parents. They provide and protect, working hard to give their children a good life. But parenting is also an emotional relationship. Children constantly bring needs, big feelings, vulnerability, and dependence. For a dismissive avoidant parent, these elements can be challenging, not because they do not love their child, but because they might not have learned how to meet emotional needs with steadiness and comfort. So they might be great at the practical side, but struggle with the emotional side. How does their value of independence play out with their children? A dismissive avoidant parent often values independence and might encourage it early. They might feel proud when their child is self-sufficient. They might praise toughness or admire composure. These values can help a child become strong, but the risk is that independence becomes the main goal and showing emotions becomes uncomfortable. If a child cries, the parent might feel overwhelmed. They might want the crying to stop quickly. They might offer solutions instead of comfort. They might say the child is fine or try to distract them. In those moments, the child might not feel emotionally understood. Over time, the child can learn that feelings are not welcome and that comfort is limited, which can lead to avoidant attachment being passed down. It sounds like a cycle. The parent teaches what they know. What about emotional mirroring? How does that factor in? Mirroring is when a parent notices and gently names a child's feelings, helping the child feel understood. If the parent did not get this mirroring as a child, they might not know how to offer it. They might go straight to talking about behavior, rules, and consequences, rather than the child's inner world. This can create a child who behaves well but feels alone with their feelings. Later, the child might become self-contained, which looks like maturity but is often emotional distance. So the child learns to keep their feelings to themselves. What about when a child is clingy or during times of conflict? Avoidant parents can also be uncomfortable with clinginess. Many young children naturally cling when they are tired, scared, or overwhelmed. Clinginess can trigger an avoidant parent's fear of being trapped. The parent might feel crowded by the child's need. They might pull away or get irritated. They might encourage the child to soothe themselves quickly. Some self-soothing is healthy, but if the child is pushed away when they are upset, the child learns that closeness is not safe when feelings are big. The child might adapt by becoming less expressive and more independent, which reinforces avoidant attachment. And during conflict, when a child is angry or defiant. When a child is angry or defiant, the parent might feel overwhelmed. They might respond by withdrawing or by being very strict. They might shut down or punish without discussion. The child might then feel scared or ashamed. The parent might not try to fix things afterward because fixing things needs emotional conversation. Without this repair, the child learns that conflict breaks connection. As an adult, that child might avoid conflict or shut down, repeating the pattern. The parent might mean to discipline, but the child experiences disconnection. It is clear that even with good intentions, these patterns can be passed down. How can dismissive avoidant parents heal these patterns and be more emotionally present for their children? Healing begins with awareness. Many dismissive avoidant parents do not want to repeat emotional neglect. They often care deeply. Awareness helps because it allows the parent to slow down and choose a different response. Instead of fixing immediately, the parent can comfort first. Instead of dismissing tears, the parent can stay present. Instead of pushing independence too quickly, the parent can support dependence when the child is upset. These changes can feel uncomfortable for an avoidant parent because they require sitting with emotion, but they can be learned. So, choosing to act differently, even when it is hard, what about repair after a difficult moment? It also helps avoidant parents to practice repair. Repair means coming back after a hard moment and acknowledging what happened. It might mean saying sorry for being impatient. It might mean explaining that you were overwhelmed. It might mean telling the child they are still loved. Repair teaches children that relationships can handle mistakes. It also teaches the parent that showing vulnerability can be a strength. For avoidant parents, repair is often one of the most powerful changes because it directly stops the old family pattern of moving on without emotional connection.
That is so important, showing that connection can be restored. Finally, let's talk about the cycle of detachment across generations. How do these dismissive avoidant patterns repeat in families even when no one means for them to? Detachment often travels quietly through families. It does not always show up as obvious neglect. It can look like emotional silence, practical care without warmth, and a family culture that values being tough over being tender. One generation raises children with a limited emotional comfort. Those children grow up and learn to rely on themselves. They become adults who struggle with showing vulnerability. When they become parents, they might provide a stable life but still struggle to offer emotional closeness. The cycle continues. Understanding this cycle matters because it can feel like a family fate, but it is not. It is a pattern that can be seen, named, and changed. So it is like a chain reaction where patterns are passed down without anyone really realizing it. How does this cycle usually begin?
The cycle often begins with parents who themselves did not receive emotional support. A parent who grew up without comfort might not know how to give it. They might love their child deeply but still feel awkward when the child cries. They might not know what to say when the child is afraid. They might respond with practical solutions, discipline, or by saying it is not a big deal. The child learns that feelings are not welcome. The child learns to become self-contained. This learning becomes their way of connecting. The child grows into an adult who looks independent and feels emotionally guarded. And then they repeat what they learned with their own children, even if it is not what they want. Exactly. When that adult becomes a parent, they might repeat what they know. They might focus on providing, they might work hard, they might keep the house running, they might teach responsibility. They might also struggle with emotional attunement. When their child cries, they might feel overwhelmed. When their child is clingy, they might feel trapped. They might push for independence early. The child learns the same lesson. Feelings are handled alone. The cycle continues without anyone ever saying, "We do not do feelings." It continues because feelings were never made safe and familiar. It sounds very subtle, but deeply impactful. How else is this detachment maintained across generations?
Detachment can also be kept alive by family loyalty and denial. Many families do not talk about emotional pain. They might see emotional conversations as not needed or disrespectful. Children grow up learning that you do not talk about what is missing. You do not complain. You do not ask for more. You accept the family way. If a child feels lonely, they might not know how to say it. They might tell themselves their family is fine. As adults, they might continue this loyalty by refusing to look at their childhood. They might say nothing bad happened. The cycle continues because it is never questioned. So, a silent agreement to not rock the boat. How do we break the cycle of detachment? Breaking the cycle begins with naming it. When you can see that detachment is a family pattern, not a personal failure, you gain understanding and clarity. You stop thinking you are simply cold. You start realizing you learned a way of relating that protected you. You also start seeing that your parents may have learned it too. This does not excuse harm, but it explains it. Explanation makes change possible because it turns blame into understanding and understanding into choice. That shift from blame to understanding is powerful. What are some specific actions that can help break the cycle?
Cycle breaking also involves repair. Detached families often move on without talking. Repair teaches a different lesson. If you get angry at your child, you come back and apologize. If you pull away from your partner, you return and explain. If you miss a friend's need, you acknowledge it. Repair shows that relationships can handle emotion. It also shows that being human does not destroy connection. For dismissive avoidance, learning repair is powerful because it replaces silence with returning, and returning is the base of secure connection. So, acknowledging mistakes and reconnecting. And what about learning to tolerate tenderness? Another part of breaking the cycle is learning to tolerate tenderness. Tenderness can feel uncomfortable for avoidant people because it brings up vulnerability, but tenderness is also what heals. Tenderness can be as simple as a gentle tone, listening, or a comforting touch. It does not have to be dramatic. It just needs to be consistent. Consistent tenderness teaches children and partners that feelings are welcome, not inconvenient.
Over time, this changes the emotional atmosphere of the family.
This conversation has shed so much light on why certain family dynamics exist and how deeply rooted they can be. Understanding these patterns, as we have learned from Mindy Rivers' book, Understanding the Dismissive Avoidant Attachment Style, helps us move from judgment to compassion for ourselves and our loved ones. It also gives us a path to make different choices, creating a new kind of strength that includes both independence and deep connection.